Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got a compilation of r/TraumatizeThemBack for you all. As per usual, this is a way for you to get caught up on past videos that have been long forgotten in the catalog of content this channel uploads. So feel free to take a look, and don't forget to check out GamerSupps. Use code Oz at checkout. Glittering Jello, safe for work. Traumatizing the two guys at the gas station. So 3 years ago, at 2 a.m., I was going to work early. I decided to stop at the gas station and pump gas. A stupid decision because I'm a woman who was alone. When two guys appeared, came to my driver's side and leaned up against my driver door, while the others swung open my other side. I'm half deaf, and I didn't hear them walk up until they got closer. The guy leaning in on my driver's side goes, "Smile for me, pretty lady." So I just say, "If you don't leave me alone now, I'll pour gas all over you and light you on fire." When the guy leaning up on my driver's side goes, "Jesus, I was only going to flirt," before they both took off walking across the street. The gas station attendant came out because he was worried once he saw the two guys sandwich me in. He waited for me to get in my car and leave, but I still hope those two guys think, "Man, this crazy woman tried to set us on fire." That is actually something I've never thought of, as how spooky it could be as a woman trying to pump gas at 2 a.m. Because for me, it's like, oh boy, 2 a.m., time to go out driving. Oh, gotta stop at a gas station, may as well go inside and go buy things. Never thought of it from that perspective of, oh yeah, going to a gas station alone at night could actually be really dangerous. Huh. Also, guys, if it's dark out and like you see a woman alone, don't sandwich them in. What are you doing? I know you're probably trying to like test out your new pickup lines that you learned from Andrew Tate. But seriously, don't box them in. That's not okay. You're gonna come off as some kind of sex offender. Don't do that. Well, Oz, I hear you asking, how am I supposed to pick up chicks? By not going to a gas station at 2 a.m. Just don't do stuff that puts you in a position where you'll come off as being like some kind of predatory aggressor. Just for like a fun little experiment though, because I think this would be kind of really cool to see. For the females in my audience. Or for the twinks at gay bars. Pretty similar demographic here. Not really, but it does kind of apply. What's the worst way to get hit on? And what's the best situation to be hit on in? Genuine question. Like, it's not for me, but partially, I just want to see what kind of crazy shit people have had to deal with in the comments section. As well as actually helping to give the males in my audience some decent advice that doesn't come from Andrew Tate, who says, yeah, if you got a girlfriend, tell her you're cheating on her. That'll make her respect you more. Joypill15. I was a crappy customer to our crappy customer. Saw a post here that reminded me of the situation, so I figured I'd share it here and give you guys a good laugh. I used to work at a customer service job at a dispensary. We had this one customer who was just a cranky, miserable woman. She'd come in acting all sweet, say hi to us all, ask for her product, and then the show would begin. Here's an example of how these transactions typically went. "This isn't what I ordered. Go get what I ordered." Employee: Ma'am, you specifically requested this 8th. You said you wanted 3.5 grams of brownie Scott. "No, I said I wanted the pineapple gummies. Go get them now." We would get the things she said she wanted. She'd complain about lazy employees, be all smiles again. And then she would pay and leave. And be right back in the store a half hour later with any excuse she could think of. The package was open when she got it. The edibles were melted together. There was a hair in her jar. The package smelled like chlorine. Any stupid excuse she could pull from her ass looking for a refund or for store credit. She would try and use it. Every single time she came in, this is how it went. But then, one day, I went to a gas station to fill up my car while I was in the next town over. And wouldn't you be damned? She was a cashier at the gas station. So, I of course asked for a pack of Marlboro's 100s. She grabbed the pack and I said, "That's not what I asked for. I asked for the Camels." She grabbed the Camels. That's not what I wanted. I wanted the Newports." She sighed and grabbed the Newports. "What are you doing? I'm just here to pay for my gas." The long stare she gave me was almost enough to make me regret starting shit. But she knew, as an employee, she could get in real trouble if she snapped. So she forced a smile, put my cash in the register, and I went on my merry way. But I wasn't done. I came back in 5 minutes later. I looked at her and I said, "Excuse me, I only spent X amount on gas, but you took all of my money. Where's my change?" She is obviously super pissed off at this point, but what was she gonna do about it? That's fucking right. Absolutely nothing. So she tries very hard and fails to politely explain to me that the gas cost the amount I had given her and she couldn't give me the difference. So in a voice that almost sounded exactly like hers, I complained about lazy employees, smiled sweetly, said goodbye, and walked out, just like she does. She didn't learn her lesson for a while, came back in a few times with the same old routine. Then I recruited a coworker, and we both went back to that gas station separately a few times and did our new routine. After trying and failing to file a complaint, she stopped coming in entirely, and balance was finally restored. I don't work at the dispenser anymore, but traumatizing her the way that she did my coworkers and I still makes me smile years later. Alright, so genuine question, is it okay to retaliate like this? Because in my mind, my brain immediately jumps to yes, but I could also understand how this could definitely cause some problems in the line. I mean, it's funny, don't get me wrong, and she probably definitely deserves it because the dispensary is not the only place she does this at, I guarantee it. But like, gang, is it okay to bully a service worker if they're an asshole? Morty and Murphy, you're my mother, not my friend. I'm your parent, not your friend. Anyone with a boomer set of parents has heard that particular phrase before, and surface level, I do agree with the idea that parents should not be trying to win their children's affection by being cool or having lax rules. But my parents, like most, didn't really have the emotional nuance necessary to wield the idea gracefully. They hammered this idea home every time I expressed hurt or unhappiness. Not when I was pushing the boundaries. They also loved to say, I love you, but I don't have to like you right now, when I did act out. If I said that the way I was being helped with my homework was not actually helpful, then I was being disrespectful and got the I'm not one of your little friends speech, just to name a few examples. Time rolls on, and like most millennials, I sort of check out of our relationship. I'm fulfilled and supported emotionally outside of my family, like I always have been. I love my parents, spent an appropriate amount of time with them, and just accepted that I have one of those families. I am an only child, so it gets lonely sometimes, but it's fine. We love each other, but I've accepted that I will not get the emotional support that most people get from their families. Well, my father got sick. Really sick. My husband and I stepped up and took care of my family, but after his passing, my mother has started to realize how distant I am. She wants a Steel Magnolias-esque emotional moment between us and has been trying to force one since my father died last November. Notably, she only wanted that after all the attention from everyone else had died out post-funeral. 4 months after my father's passing, she starts sloppily probing about how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, how I'm managing my grief. My father and I had a complicated relationship, but I did love him a lot. I've been gray-rocking my mother since I was 20, so after 12 years of experience, it comes very easy to me. We have a short list of acceptable topics that I refuse to stray from. Finally, she got tired of good, staying busy, plus topic change as my response. During one of our scheduled phone calls, she snapped at me to just be honest with her about how I was doing and if I even missed him at all. My response? You're my mother, not my friend. The silence over the phone was palpable. She made an excuse to get off the phone, and that was that. Edit to add, there is more context to a relationship that made those type of comments a cherry on top of a shit Sunday. You can find it in my comments, I don't like typing it out very much. 2. I wanted to go to family therapy a couple of times in my 20s. They declined. It is what it is. I love my mother and will make sure she's comfortable and taken care of. We speak a couple of times a week and have dinner a couple of times a month, but I'm not one of her little friends either. They made their choices, and I can't pour from an empty cup. Edit 2, apparently people need it spelled out. They were abusive physically and emotionally. Yes, I only get one mother, but she only got one me. I did my part to try to fix our relationship. They did not want to do the work. That final rejection of family therapy or mediation was the nail in the coffin. If our relationship makes you upset or bothered, then imagine how I must feel, feeling about it before you comment. So, as some input from me, there is a very, very fine line that has to be walked between being a friend and being a parent. And what they were doing is they weren't really being a parent either. They were just being a guardian that had no interest in their child's development. A parent is someone who knows when to be a parent and knows when to be a friend. While I did not grow up with a parent who was more focused on the ruthless parenting aspect of it, I did have a parent who was more interested in being a friend. And when you're like 7 years old, yeah, that relationship is awesome, but as you grow up, you kind of realize that, well, It's not awesome, actually. I certainly feel for OP, and I can't even imagine what it'd be like losing a parent, but I suppose in this situation, perhaps the relationship wasn't that close. I also wouldn't be surprised if the mother turns around in a couple weeks or two and says, "I never said that to you, you're remembering it incorrectly," or something along those lines. But the thing is, the axe forgets, the tree remembers. Long Pirate 9830. Yes, we're having an ice cream party. My cousin is dying. About 2 years ago, my cousin Kara died, and to make it a bit easier on the kids, we threw an ice cream party. I know how bizarre and unhinged that sounds, but we had recently had a lot of family members die over the past few years, and it was all weighing heavy on all of our hearts to have one more go, especially before her time. We are also big believers on celebrating our loved ones and their lives. We still make time and cry to mourn, but we do things we know they would have loved. I swear if my funeral isn't a big party, I will haunt my children and siblings. So, my mom calls us to tell us that Kara's been pronounced brain dead, and all the kids have been crying for about 2 days now, worried sick about her. My mom comes up with the brilliant idea of getting all the kids together and having an ice cream social to bring their spirits up. And heck yeah, Kara would have loved that. My husband and I are the ones to go to the store and get all the ice cream. I look awful. I've been watching 8 Kids for the past 2 days and it shows. I was so happy to go and get a break from them. I grab about 15 different ice cream flavors, ones we love, fancy ones, new ones, and about every topping in the aisle. Like 3 kinds of cones too. And I go to check out. The line was longer than I liked, but it was the weekend. Some Karen gets behind me immediately and I can hear her whispering to her husband. I can't make out much of what she says, but I do hear ice cream. So I assume she was just, pointing it out to her husband to look. No big deal. I'd probably do the same if I saw someone grab half of the ice cream aisle. I do notice she was doing it the entire time we were waiting. It's finally my turn and I'm being rung out. The cashier says something about, "Oh, I must be really craving some ice cream." And I made some stupid joke about it being gone in one sitting. Very, very obvious. It was a bad joke, if you could even call it that. And the Karen decides to speak up, finally saying how I'm letting myself go. My body is a temple and I should nurture it with nutritious foods. My boyfriend is going to leave me and blah, 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 blah. I turn to her and say, "We just got the news my cousin is dead. We're throwing an ice cream party." No other context, no nothing, just a big smile on my face, then go back to a completely straight face. I seriously must have looked demented or something. She just stared at me with her mouth open. She doesn't say anything else the entire time. We pay and leave. My husband bursts out laughing when we get to the car. He swears up and down to this day I said my cousin is finally dead, but I don't remember saying it that way. He also said the cashier went wide-eyed when I said that. We got home and we had a great time. I took a shower, felt much better, looked better too. The kids really enjoyed the ice cream party. We dressed all the kids up and put on a movie. I think it was The Labyrinth and then The Dark Crystal since Kara loved those movies. I finally got to try pistachio ice cream and had this fancy coffee kind where the ice cream was coffee brewed and it was divine. My new favorite. Love you, Kara. You would have loved this coffee ice cream. When I eat it, I think about you. I see that Kara is a David Bowie fan, also a Jim Henson fan. I really do wonder if the lady actually believed that all the ice cream was for her, because there comes a point when you're buying something where it's pretty obvious you're not buying it for yourself. I mean, there's like a fine limit. Like if I see someone buying a dozen donuts, I'm like, okay, that could be for you, it could be for a couple people, but I know for me, I can eat a dozen donuts in a sitting. 2 dozen donuts? Either you're having a really bad night or you have company over. But once you hit like 4 dozen donuts, 5 dozen donuts, okay, yeah, you're having a party. Same goes for ice cream. A pint of ice cream, maybe you're having a bad night. 2 pints of ice cream, okay, you might be restocking the freezer. 3 pints of ice cream is probably like a school party or something, and then as it increases, it's more and more likely that there's something large going on that's not just someone, watching movies and eating ice cream all night. Semi-related, but my friends and I, we used to play this game that we called 3 items. You had to pick out 3 items to make the cashier as uncomfortable as you possibly could. The game essentially started with banana, Vaseline, condoms, the basics. Then we started getting more interesting. The one that finally made me win was condoms, raw chicken, and a dog's shock collar. The only reason why I remember that is just because of the idea of someone judging you for what you're buying, and That was something that my buddies and I actively used to do to just cause chaos. Granted, for some of the more, fucked up item combinations that we ended up getting, I don't know if the cashier put it together, because some of them got pretty bizarre and pretty unique, and definitely, needed some explanations or prior context to understand, but that was how we spent our Saturdays. Your new best friend. People keep harassing me about only having one child. They stop bothering me when I explain why in detail. So I only have one child, and shortly after her birth, we decided we're going to stop at one child. Some distant family members of my husband didn't agree with that and kept pestering me about having another child. I told them I had a rough time with pregnancy and birth, so I didn't want to go through that again with the second child. They told me I was selfish and could put up with it so that my child could have a sibling. They were even trying to get my child to pester me about having a sibling. So one day, they were pestering me again, and I went into detail. I told them that I almost died giving birth to the point where the hospital team had the crash cart out. And I was on my way to the ICU when I finally regained consciousness and my blood pressure stabilized. To this day, they don't really understand why it happened besides an allergic reaction to one of the medications they gave me, but they aren't entirely sure that was the reason. Multiple doctors have told me that I should not get pregnant again because that complication might reoccur. I have told those family members that I cannot risk dying just so my daughter can have a sister or brother, and I think it would be selfish of me to have another time and risk both of them not having a mother. Needless to say, they have stopped bothering me. It really is a damn shame that it's kind of resorted to the fact where you have to have some kind of traumatic problem to be able to get these kind of questions off your back. There's nothing wrong with just wanting to have an only child. I was an only child. It kind of sucks just simply saying yeah, I don't know, one child's good enough for us. I mean, we're pretty happy with it, is just somehow not the answer they ever want to hear. More grandkids, more grandkids. Come on, you only got a few good years left until your womb is no longer fertile. And you'd hope I'm being sarcastic, but you motherfuckers also know that people do actually say shit like that. Ugh. Oh yeah, anyways, it's a damn shame that you pretty much have to drop either some kind of fucked up medical history on them or some other excuse that's equally as fucked up for them to stop pestering you about this. Montgomery Zeph. Boss says my chemo treatment isn't as bad as all that. I put the evidence in her hand. A few years ago, I needed a course of chemotherapy and was warned to expect the usual side effects: nausea, fatigue, aches and pains, and of course, hair loss. Well, after the first couple of rounds, I was feeling fairly good, not too nauseous, which had weirdly been my main worry, as I hate throwing up. Vomit-free since '93, etc., etc. My gums had begun to hurt though, and I was starting to notice my hair was beginning to get, well, shall we say a little bit loose. I noticed a little bit more on my comb, and a little more in the shower drain than usual. Now, I'd usually just put this down to regular old male pattern baldness paranoia, MPDP, but I reckon the drugs were beginning to take effect. Well, a couple of rounds further on, I really knew it. I felt pretty old and creaky. I had mouth ulcers and my appetite had vanished. Actually, that's not quite true. I occasionally craved a BLT sandwich, squashed wafer thin and chilled to near sub-zero temperature. I asked the doctor if this meant anything, and she said, yes, it now means I want a BLT for lunch. Helpful. However, my hair was still in place, but I could feel it was losing the battle to cling on, even so. Now, I worked in a small office, and my boss, Carla, fake name, was a woman in her 40s who was, shall we say, kind of self-involved. She would talk incessantly about herself, and the theme was always the same: how hard her life was and the many insufferable situations that she had to deal with. And being forced to listen to a lot of these problems, we all came to the conclusion that most of these insufferable situations were A, basically just run-of-the-mill problems everyone has to deal with, and B, largely self-inflicted. And when it came to work, no matter what the issue was or how it needed to be fixed, it always came back to her and how the situation made her feel. Any given meeting was at least 40% discussing how this issue affected her personally and deleteriously, when all we wanted to do was just get the job done. It got pretty annoying from time to time, but apart from the occasional inward sigh at her behavior, I powered through. Until I told her about my upcoming chemo. At first, she seemed cool with everything. I take 3 days off every couple of weeks to stay on a ward for the treatment, and I'd be back in the office the remaining time. No problem, good stuff. I told a couple of other people in the office too, but I didn't talk about it much. I didn't really want to get labeled as the cancer guy, and as the subject's a bit of a downer, I didn't want to bum people out needlessly. Everyone's got something going on in their lives, right? But then, Carla's attitude began to change. I began to notice odd passive-aggressive comments she would make, mentioning my treatment or having to visit the doctor. Not much at first, but they began to grow in frequency. And then after a few days, my boss's friend came over to have a quiet conversation with me. "She's just finding it very hard to come to terms with your news," she said. "It's really affected her deeply. Just give her some time." I was pretty nonplussed at this, but asked a friend whether my situation was all bringing up some stuff from the past, or maybe a family member was ill too, but she just replied, no, nothing like that. She's just a really sensitive person." I told a friend that, well, my boss didn't really need to come to terms with anything, because it was me having the treatment and not her, and that she shouldn't worry about it. And then I went off for a long therapeutic crap to calm down. Over the next week, my boss's behavior got more passive-aggressive towards me, and slowly, a thought began to percolate through my mind. Surely she's not jealous, right? Like, surely she can't be thinking I'm pulling focus in some way from her, and now she's upset because she's not able to trump chemotherapy, because that would be, like, insanely shallow, right? Right? But the more her behavior went on, and the more I thought about it, well, once you eliminate the impossible, as Sherlock Holmes said, right? So things finally came to a head, or, of a hair. About 2 weeks later, I was at my desk but feeling fairly rough by this point. I'd finished a round of chemo 2 days earlier, and my skin was looking pretty gray. My teeth felt wobbly, but my hair was still there. But it felt like it was just kinda resting on the top of my head, rather than anchored there. A colleague noticed I looked under the weather and kindly asked me if I was okay, and I replied, "I'll be alright, thanks, but I reckon I won't have much hair this time next week." Well, my boss happened to pass by at the moment, and I could see her face screwing up as I said it. She then chipped in, "Oh, come on. I don't think chemotherapy is as bad as all that, is it?" Now, had this come from a friend, I probably would have let it go. And with my close friends, I'd made some pretty similar and extremely dark jokes myself, but so had they. But that's what you do with close friends, right? But I was not close with my boss. But something just collapsed, soggily, in the center of me when she said it. And before I knew what I was doing, I stood up and gone over to her, blocking her exit before she could leave the room. "I'm not sure, Carla," I said. "I'm not sure if chemotherapy is as bad as all that. Why don't we find out?" And as I said it, I reached up to the back of my head and casually yanked out a giant fistful of hair. Now, my hair at the time was fairly short, but pretty curly, so I had a good old amount in my hand, about the size of an enormous orange. The back of my head suddenly had a huge bald patch, of the type you usually only see in a home haircut catastrophe sort of way when the clipper guard falls off. Put your hand across the back of your head now. Imagine all of that suddenly gone, and you're in the right ballpark. I held the massive hair up in the air for a second and then looked at my boss again. "What do you think, Carla?" I said calmly. I wasn't very calmly of me to say it that way, as I plonked it down in her quivering hand. "Let me know." And I turned and left the now supernaturally quiet office. Carla just looked at the tribble in her hand as if it was a grenade. Now, not even a long therapeutic crap was going to sort this one out. So I took an early lunch and stomped out to find a place that could do me a freezing cold squash BLT sandwich with extra mayo. When I got back to the office, the HR rep was waiting near my desk. "Uh-oh." I smiled, sat down, and she came over. There was a pregnant pause. She took a breath. "A couple of your colleagues let me know what happened with Carla earlier," she began. "I see," I replied cagily. Because, as we all know, HR is not your friend. They may say they're your friend and that they're there to protect your rights, but really, they're just there to ensure the company can treat everyone shittily in a non-actionable way. Okay, rant over, back to the story. "Bearing in mind what just happened," the HR lady continued, "we'd like to offer you paid leave for the remainder of your treatment. Would that be okay with you?" Now, bearing in mind I had at least 3 more cycles of treatment lasting 6 more weeks, my answer was a carefully considered yes. Yes, I believe that would be all right with me, Mrs. HR lady. Me and my bald patch walked out of the office 10 minutes later and went home. My girlfriend and I called our friends over that evening for some beers and curry, and we all got drunk and shaved my head. Though I looked weird, I was pleasantly surprised to find my head didn't have too many weird bumps on it. Even my occipital bun was pretty small. Google it just for fun. It's the part of your skull that sticks out of the back. We should have a little picture of it popping up here. It was a good evening, especially when I decided it would be hilarious to tell my male friends how grateful I was that they all had agreed to shave their heads too in solidarity. Aw, that's nice. I handed the clippers to my friend Mike, who had dark shoulder-length hair. And didn't that magnificent bastard pause for only 2 seconds before trying to plug the clippers in. I managed to wrestle them off him, laughing my arse off. My girlfriend then told me no more beers for OP. Boo! Anyway, to cut to the chase, the rest of the treatment went well, everything went into remission, and has thankfully stayed in remission ever since. So, job done. Well done, medical team. I took the time off, got through the treatment, and also managed to find myself a new job at the same time before I had to return. Meanwhile, back at the office, Carla's star was on the wane. Word had gone around about her behavior. She tried her usual tricks, how she'd been misunderstood, and how upset she was about the whole thing. But people were noticeably colder towards her. According to my colleagues and people who had started to refer to her as hairball behind her back, the name stuck. I finally returned to work only to hand my notice in and leave. On my way out, I tried to be as classy as possible with Carla. I thanked her for the opportunity and wished her well for the future. She didn't say much. I gave her a card and a small token of my appreciation. I told her to not bother unwrapping it till she got home. It was a DVD of a popular 1979 anti-war musical directed by Milos Forman, starring John Savage and Treat Williams. The movie is just titled Hair, by the way, just so you don't have to go and Google what they're talking about. My hair grew back. I returned to my ordinary, regular, run-of-the-mill male pattern baldness paranoia. The new job was pretty terrific, and even now, I still like ice-cold, wafer-thin BLTs. Honestly, the best takeaway from this entire story is HR is not your friend, by the way. HR will do anything and everything to make sure that you are complicit within the cogs in the system and you don't try to sue the company. Just be careful and watch what you say around HR because they are not your friend, in the slightest. Bay 214. Woman told me I was a terrible daughter for not calling my mom on Mother's Day. So, I told her why. For a few years, I worked at a dispensary and loved almost all of my customers. Obviously, not all of them were great, and there was one woman specifically that always got under my skin. Rachel. For context, my mother died when she was 46 and when I was 19, and she was my best friend. Almost 10 years later, I still miss her every minute of the day. And holidays are hard for me and my family. For the last 10 years, there have been 3 holidays that I have always requested off of work: Mother's Day, her birthday, and Christmas. Last Mother's Day, I was unable to take Mother's Day off because there were only 2 people working at that store, and my manager wanted to spend Mother's Day with her mom. And of course, I let her. So, Rachel and her partner come in that day and she asks if I've called my mom yet. I said no, and tried to leave it at that, but she would not drop it, and instead started talking about how terrible of a daughter I am for not calling her, and she must be so disappointed in me. So at this point, I'm trying my best not to cry. I'm not confrontational and have a hard time standing up for myself, but after a few minutes, I finally looked her dead in the face, more serious than I've ever been before, and said, "I'd love to call my mom, but she's dead." All of the color left her face, and both her and her partner quickly made their purchase and left as fast as they could, and I never saw them again. So you can check this in the link below, but OP does go on to add an edit about some very personal stuff about their mother, including a recent dream they had and some emotions they have attached to that, as well as asking Reddit as a whole if they've had any dreams about loved ones that have passed and how it makes them feel. And this particular edit, I feel, I would only be doing a disservice to OP and their mother's memory if I were to read it publicly. So I've elected to leave it out, but if you do want to take a look, please feel free to take a look at the comments. I always include the post for every single Reddit story that I read, so you can take a look at yourself. Part of me though, and re-relating this to the main story, I do wonder how much of Rachel's actions were more self-congratulatory than anything else, and they were trying to pat themselves on the back for being such a good daughter and wishing their mother a happy Mother's Day. Because I have met people who act like this, where they self-congratulate themselves on a fairly basic and universal concept. And when they encounter something outside of the norm, they just love to get up on their little pedestal and look down on you, irregardless of any additional reasons that might be causing you to break from the norm. Much like OP's story here. Dr. McStabby. Don't think she'll be doing that again. So, I work in the medical field, as my username suggests, and after a year-long battle with cancer, my mom lost her fight. Because of this, I had to cancel my appointments for about a week because she lived out of state. When I finally got back, I was seeing a patient for a colleague, and the conversation went as such. Paraphrase because it was 2 years ago. Patient. You know, you can't just go around and cancel appointments on people all of a sudden. My wife had an appointment with you, and she needs to be seen. Me. Well, I mean, I didn't mean to cancel on her. Sometimes things just happen that we don't plan on. Patient. Oh, you doctors are always canceling on people for no reason. Why, you had to take a vacation all of a sudden? Me. I try not to cancel on people if I can, and I'm pretty sure we got her back on the schedule in the near future. Really trying hard to change the topic of conversation here. Patient. Yeah, but you shouldn't have canceled her appointment. What could have come up to make you cancel on her? Like, my wife really needed to see you. Me, super fed up at this point, and this guy has always been an ass. Well, my mom died, but I don't think she'll be doing that again, so you should be good to go from here on forward. Patient, surprised a Pikachu face. Weirdly enough, it's been 2 years, and I've not seen him again. I gave him so many chances to change the subject. I can certainly initially sympathize with wanting to know why your appointment was canceled, but after so many times of them very clearly trying to change the subject, you should reach a point where, okay, something personal did in fact happen, and I should probably back away from this. But the person that OP was dealing with was probably dead convinced that OP had gone on some kind of vacation and decided that the vacation was more important than like a medical checkup or something like that. So I could probably see him wanting to pressure to kind of catch him in the act of lying or not taking his job seriously, not realizing he was walking into one hell of an awkward situation that there would be no escape from. Well, except for apparently never showing up to the clinic ever again. Which seems to be the door that he chose. A mess of a human being. Death is very natural. My aunt and cousins are extremely crunchy, among many other things. They rant about Western medicine being full of evil chemicals and just a way for pharmaceutical companies to make money. They insist there are natural alternatives, never mind that they live in the UK with free healthcare, while these alternative practitioners cost them hundreds of pounds. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer many years ago. I had the bugger removed and underwent radioactive iodine treatment. Now, I need to take thyroid medication every day for the rest of my life to supplement my missing thyroid. Now, a year or so after my cancer treatment, I was visiting my aunt in her 60s, and we were having dinner with my cousins and their friends, all in their 20s. Somehow, the conversation amongst them had turned to illness and the evil chemicals in medicine. You know, the kind of rant that's easy when you're healthy. At some point, my aunt realized I was at the table, and this was the exchange. Sorry, OP, I know you've been through the ringer, but you're fine now, right? No more treatment? Yeah, I'm well, thanks. Just need to take my meds, but that's no bother. What do you mean, meds? I don't have a thyroid, so I take a pill to replace it. Oh no, all those chemicals. Don't they have a natural alternative? Oh yeah, you know, death. Death is very natural. I'm kind of in a weird position on this because I understand the want and desire to lead a healthy lifestyle, especially when it comes to food, especially in America. When it comes to medicine, I have to draw a really hard line on that one because yes, the current medical system does have its flaws, don't get me wrong, I'll never defend those, but what we've accomplished in the past few centuries have been nothing but incredible for how we can now treat ailments and anything wrong with the human body. And I feel like it's a disservice to those people who have dedicated their entire lives to the practice to just simply sweep it away under the rug because you have a few fucked up corporations in the mix. Now, if it ended there, that would be it. I would just simply call it where you can have your opinion on the natural medicine and call it good. However, unfortunately, this whole natural medicine movement is causing a lot of harm to people. If you're perfectly healthy and you want to choose a more natural medicated lifestyle, that is entirely up to you. But when you start pushing that onto someone else and giving them false promises and false hopes, that's when I have a problem with it. Because you'll have people who will sell essential oils and marked up with the idea that it can cure cancer or fix that kidney problem you've been having. Then desperate people will go and buy these in hopes of a solution, drop the current medication or current doctor-prescribed things that they are required to take, and die from that. Because someone sold them a natural alternative that would fix the problem better than what the doctors prescribed. And that's the biggest problem that I have with natural medicine. And also, food for thought, if natural medicines like essential oils actually had the healing properties they're sold to have, why hasn't that been monopolized to an extent that we see other medications have been? Unfortunately, some medications are price gouged because they work. And if natural alternatives also did the trick, we would see a pretty disgusting monopolization of it, kind of like the diamond industry. Diamonds are actually incredibly common stones, but they've been monopolized and sold to the masses as these incredibly rare and significant rocks. The Incubus. Is he deaf? Yes, he is. I worked at a magical resort in my teens, mostly by the pools. I worked there with a friend, Carl, who was deaf. The fact that he was deaf was noted on their name tag so customers were aware that he knew sign language. One day, while at work, it starts to rain and lightning. When you get a lightning storm, the resort makes all customers leave the pool area for safety. This upset one of the Karens at the pool, but she begrudgingly left. It was almost time to let the customers back into the pool area, but beforehand, the resort would have us attending the pool, clean the area up a bit of old towels, etc. before letting anyone else back in. Well, during this cleanup time, myself and Carl were picking things up and noted this same Karen was shouting at my friend, trying to get his attention, yelling at him to not clean up her resort towels as she wanted to ensure she kept the better area at the poolside, trying to save the seat. Carl was not responding to her shouts as could not hear her. Obviously, she saw me and started to complain about my friend me, stating how, "He's purposely ignoring me, how disrespectful, I should tell his manager." Before I could even respond, she then said, "What, is he deaf?" It was then I immediately responded with, "Yes, he is." While also being an awesome employee and friend, he helps here assisting with other deaf customers as our resort sees customers from all walks of life. Karen seemed at a loss for words and did not even respond to me, just walking away but red in the face. I told Carl about it and he had a good laugh about it. I'd be curious if you, the listener and the audience, have any fun little stories to share about whether it's you or a coworker who had to deal with a dismissive customer akin to what happened in the story that OP posted here. I always enjoy the little stories and tidbits that y'all add in the comments. I always try to read through as much as I possibly can, and it makes my day a little better seeing that y'all have had similar experiences or can relate to the stories that we got here on the channel. Abel Frosting, 5603. No proof? Oh, bless your heart. I wouldn't be surprised if some are going to think this is fake, but I feel like other disabled people will find this a little satisfying, especially with how human resource offices across the board have sunk to new levels of gaslighting. I have a genetic condition that gives me a variety of weird disorders, including a severe walnut allergy and cancer during my late teens. Since I'm in my 20s, many people assume that I'm not as disabled as I actually am, but 90% of the time, I just shrug it off. I have experienced a lot of subtle disability discrimination at work, but I've never been at a company where they're comfortable flat out saying, "We don't hire disabled people." Like, personally, I understand the logic of accidentally discriminating against me because you're worried your company could give me an allergic reaction, but every disabled person is unqualified? Which led me to this conversation. Head of Human Resources and owner of major company. I understand you had a misunderstanding with your manager yesterday, and I wanted to apologize for any mix-ups. Me? Oh, no understanding. Manager denied me a reasonable accommodation because you don't do them, and said your company doesn't hire anyone with a gap in their resume due to disability or illness. Personally, I don't see how chemotherapy I had years ago affects my qualifications for working as a store cashier. Owner. Those are serious accusations, which we will certainly look into. Unfortunately, none of our employee calls are recorded, so there's nothing I can really do about a he said, she said situation. Me cutting him off. Oh, it's not. You're welcome to treat it as a he said, she said situation if that's your decision. However, I do have the conversation captured from my own records. Owner, yeah, I'm sorry, let me understand. You recorded your conversation with our employees? Me, yeah, the state we're in is a single-party consent state. I wish I could have seen his face when I clicked play on my computer. And he heard my manager say that company was going to throw out my resume only because I needed chemotherapy a while ago since the owner was particular. The silence on the owner's end when he realized that his shitty policies were caught on a hot mic was priceless. I would add more details to show just how bad the situation got before and after reaching out to HR, but to be honest, the EEOC is about to traumatize them harder than I ever could. Edit, holy shit, I wasn't expecting this to blow up as much as it did. I wish this wasn't common, but the comments are really driving me to follow through with this. I can't promise to give all the details, but I will update even if it's to say, you should have seen his face at mediation. Questions. Were you hired or not? I was hired after my interview and thought there wasn't an issue besides a terrible joke he made, until I followed up with the manager asking for a simple no-cost accommodation, and he said that they don't do accommodations. He added that I should be excited that I was hired because they usually toss out all resumes with a gap, even when it's due to disability or illness. I asked him why he hired me then, and he said he personally felt that I got a bum hand getting cancer in high school. Otherwise, I would have been tossed too. Dude really thought I would be patting him on the back because I was the exception. Question: why were you recording? I record all conversations with management the moment they say something legally messed up, to cover my own ass. I started recording this manager after he made a fucked up joke about my walnut allergy during the interview. You can probably guess the gist, cause I'm not getting my own post flagged over what he said. Comment: only a kid could write this, /fake post. I wish this was fake. Honestly, I'd rather live in a society where this is beyond the scope of normal, and I could work without assholes making my life harder. But instead, I had to explain to my manager, like he's 5, how they're breaking the law as blatantly as possible. And then he only doubled down from there. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Comment: bot post, karma is sus. Bro, I made the cost of my boss and the owner of a Fortune 500 company a living nightmare. Of course I'm not on my usual profile. I just thought it was hilarious that I was making a post about disability and Reddit auto-generated Abel in the username. LMFAO. Can't wait to update you all on how they're shitting bricks. I don't care about settlements, etc., cause I don't expect much. After the bullshit and corporate gaslighting I went through, I just want to watch these two dudes squirm while they try to explain the recordings like, I talk with other hiring manager about your chemotherapy and cancer history, and we don't do accommodations, even if it's reasonable. If it's not a business need, then it's not a business need. It's my goal, and everything else is a cherry on top. Fake or not, this is still something that happens in the US where there is disability discrimination, and I know many people, hell, I just had a conversation with someone where this was their argument, might say that, oh, well, that's illegal in the US, you can just sue about it, or you can just do X, Y, and Z, or they can't do that, that's against the law. Yes. It's also against the law to violate OSHA regulations, but companies still do it all the time. They can get caught sometimes and end up with fines, but oftentimes cutting the corner saves enough cost to justify doing it anyways, even with the fine threat in place. It's the same thing. While technically it's illegal to fire a woman who gets pregnant because you don't want to pay out maternity leave, companies still very well do that. Yes, it's illegal for them to discriminate based upon pregnancy or disability, but honestly, they know it's going to be very difficult for you to find a proper lawyer or to even fight it or prove it, because honestly, they could make up 100 different reasons for why you were fired or let go. And most people honestly can't afford, whether it's time or the finances, to fight some kind of legal battle like that, even if there is a payout in sight. I know a common one is that companies will hide behind the fact that it's an at-will state and, oh, no, it's just X, Y, and Z, or this, and that, or oh, your position is no longer actually available at the company because of downsizing, rather than the truth behind it. Hell, I recently worked for a company where they had fired an employee claiming that the position was no longer available, then recreated the position and re-established it under a different title and handed it out to someone else. Companies do shit like this all the time. DJ Darwin, 93. I told him I'm gay. I'm a straight male in my 20s, living in an area of Florida that's known for its retiree population, even amongst Floridians. This is where native Floridians go to retire. As such, there is a disproportionately higher number of racist, homophobic, and sexist old people running around my area. I work at a local library, so I have to put up with their abuse on a daily basis. Like I said, I'm straight. I promise That's relevant. I also wear earrings, like a lot of them, and necklaces, bracelets, and rings. My nose isn't pierced yet, but I'm planning on it soon. Same for tattoos. I've been told I look like a punk rocker on a permanent Hawaiian vacation. This is not a look that certain people appreciate, but I don't care. Part of the appeal of looking how I do is pissing off people who look down on anyone who's other. One morning a few months back, I was in a grocery store before my morning commute. I was just grabbing a donut and chocolate milk to have a driving breakfast. I'm waiting patiently in line, minding my own business, when a voice from behind me says, "Take that metal out of your ears, boy, you look like a homo." I turn around to see an old guy who probably should have died of old age before I was born. Working with the public and dressing in a manner most of them find distasteful, I get this kind of abuse all the time. At work, I can't say or do anything unless they get really rude, but now I finally have a chance and I decide to take advantage of it. My first instinct was to lay into him, but I had to get going, and I knew that that was the reaction that he wanted. So instead, I pretended to misunderstand him. I smiled at him and said, "Thank you, my boyfriends love it. They think I'm so cute." He didn't respond or leave or anything. He just kind of looked at me with his mouth open. I gave him a big smile and turned away. He didn't say or do anything else. But when I got up to the cashier, he smiled and said, "You do look really cute." I wish I had turned around to see the boomer's response, but unfortunately, I didn't think to at the time. Too long didn't read. A homophobe said I look gay with earrings. I told him my boyfriends think I'm cute with them. I love the addition of that being plural. It adds so many questions to the feeble mind of someone who can't comprehend a guy liking a guy. Props to OP for being based as fuck, by the way. Practical Society 47. My late husband is the strong, silent type. So this happened a few years back. At the time, I had been widowed for about 2 years. I missed my late husband a lot, so I kept his urn of ashes on my bedside table as I was in the habit of talking to him about my day and saying goodnight at bedtime. One day, the doorbell rang. Being the socially anxious gal that I am, I ignored it. But they rang the bell 3 more goddamn times, and I became more annoyed than anxious and answered the door. To my great displeasure, there was a man at my door who wanted to talk about the state of the gutters and how desperately they needed to be cleaned. How convenient was it that this man was willing to do the vile job of cleaning the gutters for $250? It should be noted that I lived in a row home at the time and had one eaves trough that went across the edge of the roof, connecting all the units and one downspout. I tried to politely decline, but he kept up with his pre-programmed speech and asserted that he needed to speak with the man of the house. Cue the malicious compliance. I leaned back into the house and called my husband's name. "Mark," I shouted, "there's a guy at the door. Wants to talk about cleaning our gutters." Obviously, my spouse did not respond. I shouted louder for my spouse, but again, he didn't hear me or come to the door. Apologizing to the man, I told him I would just run upstairs and get the man of the house. As promised, I did run upstairs and grab Mark. I returned to the front door, lamenting out loud to Mark how frustrating it is when he doesn't respond to me calling for him, and I hate it when he gives me the silent treatment. "Here's the man of the house," I exclaim, holding up the urn like a game show prize. I continued my lament to the salesman that although Mark is a great listener, I'm saddened by how uninvolved he is with our children. He's the strong silent type, I concluded to the now silent, bug-eyed salesman. I decided to increase my dedication to the bit, as well as the sales jerk's sexist discomfort, and allowed my tears to flow unfettered. Normally, I loathe crying in front of strangers, but the grief of losing the father of my children, mixed with the rage at the arrogance and dismissive sexism, led me to sob screaming how much I hated my current life. There were tears and so much ugly crying, snot-sobbing noises coming out of me that I didn't even realize he had made a mad dash to get away from this hysterical woman and back to his truck. It was cathartic for me to release those pent-up emotions. Sometimes I still laugh about it with Mark. I know he definitely would be howling with laughter, as he was also quite the jokester. So I do have a bit of a story, and while it definitely does not compare to using your late husband's urn to essentially own someone who's extremely pushy, I've always had really bad baby face growing up, and when I was able to get into my first home, I had to deal with people every time I would answer the door, be like, "Oh, is your mom or dad home?" This probably happened more times than I can count on my hand, but eventually I got to the point where I would say, "Yeah, let me get them," and I would close the door and not come back. So That was always fun. Chronically pickled. Oops, I think I broke him. Let me set a scene for you. I, 31 female, am visiting a boomer father from out of state. We're sitting around the dinner table with the rest of my family talking. My parents split when I was 13 or 14. They have both remarried, but my father absolutely cannot let it go, and still shits all over my mom to this day. Also, he recently developed this weird sense of accomplishment and brags that you have to raise kids to be insecure. Because in his mind, the only way for someone to think of other people is to guilt them into it. So they learn to guilt themselves into it. So he's actively boasting his success in raising kids to be insecure. And I flatly say, except that it turned me into a doormat. I sought the approval of other people so badly that I just let anyone use me, especially as a teenager. My father sees this as an opportunity to trash my mom and says, "Yeah, your brother told me you used to sneak boys over to your mom's at night. That would have never happened if I had gotten sole custody of you instead of your mom." My response, actually, it probably would have happened a lot more. In fact, the very first time it happened was here. Let me tell you, the shock on his face was freaking priceless. He was almost too dumbfounded to ask. What? I tell him, yeah, I usually take my window screen out and have them climb through the bedroom window. His jaw was on the table. I deliver the final blow. Oh, and by the way, I was 15 the first time. He was 20. So a man, not a boy. That tends to happen when you're so insecure that you'll do anything for approval. And that's when his brain broke. I have never seen him back away from a conversation so quickly. He had no clue how to respond to that, so he just changed the topic, which honestly stood out way more than if he had actually responded to what I said. If you were to ask him about the conversation now, I'm 100% certain he has wiped it from his memory. His small mind cannot fathom it. So I'm not surprised when he acts like it never happened. He still brags about raising the kids to be insecure, but honestly, having that lasting image of the shock on his face, that's all I need. Made a secondary account finally so I can get this shit off my chest. Too long didn't read, witnessed my father's brain wipe its hard drive and reboot after I told him the extent of the effect of his trash parenting. God, the comment about parents just simply wiping their brain of something like it never happened or having the denial of it is one of the most frustrating things to deal with, because a conversation will happen, they'll clearly be in the wrong, and then suddenly, like magic, that never happened, or oh, you're misremembering that, or no, that's not true. And they'll just change the subject and move on. And that's not even touching upon the fucked up sentiment of, oh yeah, raising my children with insecurities, that's a good thing. What kind of fucked up version of control is that? Jesus Christ. Akari Cookie. Group of dudes laughed about me buying a bunch of sweets, dropped a nuclear bomb on them. That actually just happened today. I don't know which flair to use, and I apologize for my English, as it's not my first language. I was in a supermarket buying a bunch of sweets. I mean it. And it looked like I shoved the whole aisle of vegan chocolate in my basket and dumped it on the conveyor belt. Vegan chocolate here is mostly small candy bars and way too expensive 100-gram chocolate bars. It was like 20 to 25 euros worth of candy. Looked a lot because the sheer amount of candy bars was way too much, but not like a full conveyor belt of candy. Well, in front of me were a group of older teenage boys, like 18 to 19 years old, talking and laughing, till they saw my sweets. Now they laughed again, but at me, at my sweets galore, at my big belly, BMI of 30 says hi. Normally, I would just give them a sharp glance and say nothing, but no, not today. I had a kinda good day today. My shyness couldn't hold me back. I took my headphones off, I turned the music off at the checkout, and only had them on because they were soothing for me, and said, calmly, have fun laughing, but when you find out that you have cancer that'll probably kill you, you're the first one buying a mountain of sweets. Silence. All the color left their faces and they quietly paid and left. Now, I don't have cancer, just crippling depression, but I thought, what if they laugh at someone who has cancer? How will they feel? I don't want anyone to feel bad, but people who laugh at others, they have to learn what impact they may have. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But today, I ruined their fun they had on the cost of others. Oh, and I told the cashier that I didn't have cancer, I just wanted to teach them a lesson. Apparently, these guys are there often. Probably after going to the gym, which is right upstairs. They had gym bags with them. And they like to make fun of others. Smile at it. I know I have awful eating habits. Eating is a coping mechanism for me and for others too. And I know it's not a healthy one. I know that a BMI of 30 is too much, and I know that it shows. I am slowly working on it, but everyone has fallbacks, like today. Regardless, no one deserves to be laughed at when they are at a low point in their life and or sick. Today, they just laughed at me. Tomorrow, they might have laughed at someone who lost someone dear to them or who got a death sentence. I don't want that to happen to anyone, ever. And if it means bonking them with the guilt hammer, so be it. I don't wish that anyone gets a cancer diagnosis. I wish I could take the cancer and sickness of others onto me, so people can enjoy their lives, but I can't take that sickness from others. So maybe with what I did, one other person doesn't get laughed at, which is a win for me. Still, I know it was a nuclear option and rather insensitive, and I own up to that, and I apologize for it. Also, as someone reported me to Reddit resources, I am fine. I will try to think optimistic and assume that it was out of concern and not to harass me. Yes, I have depression, chronic, and have had it my whole life, which is why I may sound cynical or pessimistic sometimes. But I am in psychiatric care and I take my medication every day. Just forget my vitamins sometimes, but who doesn't? So, general question, and this is more of a kind of poking at my brain here because I've always wondered this. For someone who has had cancer or had a family member have cancer, how do you feel about people weaponizing or utilizing a false cancer diagnosis in order to put someone in their place? Like, is it fine in your eyes because it's for the greater good, or do you feel like they're taking something from you in order to further their own agenda? I've always really wondered that, and I thought this is the perfect opportunity to ask it because I have a platform and I can ask stupid questions all the time. And yeah, here I am asking this question. Is it a stupid question? I don't think it is. I think it's a genuine, actual, honest question. Legitimate trash, 6111. Ex stalked and harassed me after we broke up. 10 years later, karma caught up with him. My ex, 34 male, recently reached out to me, 32 female, after 10 years of no contact. When we broke up, we agreed to stay friends, but what started as the occasional text or phone call from him escalated into multiple texts, calls, and voicemails, Facebook messages, and emails, asking why I hadn't responded yet. These would usually cycle in patterns of wanting to hang out as friends, telling me he still loved me, and calling me heartless and childish for pushing him away. At one point, he called me, extremely angry, because he had been logging into my Facebook and seen a message from my new housemate, which he thought was flirtatious. I changed all my passwords, blocked him on everything, tried going full no contact. 2 months later, I find out he created a fake Facebook profile using a sexual image of a woman. It didn't show her face, and an imitation of my name, and was using it to interact with my friends. I'm young. I didn't realize this is criminal. I didn't think to call the police. He then used the photo to ask immoral strangers on 4chan if they could investigate and prove that it was me. So, at this point, he realized he'd gone too far and apparently had a full psychotic break from reality. His landlord called the police and he ended up detained under the Mental Health Act for being a danger to himself and others. A year of no contact later, he creates a new Facebook to reach out again, asking to meet up for a no-strings-attached coffee, as he's written a book about his psychosis and he wanted to clear the air with me. I decline a face-to-face chat but asked to read his book. He's confused to why I don't want to meet him, and becomes angry that I keep asking to read the book. I block him again. After 10 years of complete no contact, he reaches out again, on another new account. I don't answer, but this prompts me to check his profile and see that he just self-published the book. In it, he admits to reading my messages, but fails to mention all the stalking, harassment, impersonation, defamation, and dodgy shit on 4chan. Instead, he accuses me of being the abusive one. I discover I still have access to all Facebook conversations, even from deleted accounts. I send him the screenshots of him admitting to these crimes 10 years ago. He blocks me. I discover he's on Twitter, saying I'm accusing him of breaking the law when he hasn't. I create a Twitter account and post the screenshots there. In a grave error of judgment, he retweets me, trying to mock me, but in doing so draws attention to my account. He panics, calls the police, and claims I'm harassing him. The police call me for my side, and I explain all of this. They call him back to tell him he's the only one who's broken the law, and if he contacts me again, I have the right to press charges. He had even submitted evidence for his claim, which the police told me hadn't done him any favors and actually supported my version of events. He somehow still thinks he's in the right and made a 25-minute YouTube video complaining about how none of this is fair. He acknowledges that my Twitter account is harmless and within the confines of the law. The only thing that connects it to him are the screenshots of his now deleted replies saying, "No one cares about this but you. Move on." But complains about how draining it is for him that I'm attacking his reputation. Although he can't see himself in my shoes and realize how he traumatized me 10 years ago, it's nice to know he had a taste of his own medicine and it made him throw a tantrum. And also that his own volunteered evidence damned him. Good God, I can't even describe how good that felt. God, I really do love it when people accidentally post evidence that actually invalidates their arguments and makes them look to be the bad guy when they think it's actually clearing their name. Oh boy, do I love that. If only there were examples from my personal life that I could actually give to help support this claim. Oh well. But on another more important note, if you do end up in a scenario like this, please, for the love of God, keep a paper trail, keep screenshots, because you never know. That folder of hundreds of screenshots might actually come in handy one day. Paper trails are important, and OP here is a perfect example of that. They kept screenshots in order to show their innocence and actually were able to make a great case for themselves to keep their psychotic ex, quite literally in this case, off of their back. Hadley Witch, because life sucks, that's why. A bit of backstory. My next door neighbor growing up, who became a third grandma to me, and I will refer to her as Gran from now on, was originally a Jehovah's Witness until her divorce, when the church kicked her out. As a result, she's not fond of that organization anymore and really doesn't like talking to them. One day I was over there visiting and we noticed a group of JWs making their way through the neighborhood. Gran makes a comment about hoping they don't come to her door. I told her I'd handle it if they did. Two of them came up to her door, a younger teenage girl and what was probably her mother. They knock, I answer the door. The exchange goes like this. Girl, have you ever wondered why bad things happen to good people? Me. Because life sucks and then you die. The look on that poor girl's face was priceless. My gran could not stop laughing. I almost felt bad about this, but they never came to my gran's house again. And honestly, that was far more important to me. So I chose this post because I have a bit of a funny confession to make. And I feel kind of bad because while they are very incredibly nice women, they can't take a hint. So every few months, I get the same pair of JW missionaries that appear at my door. It's the same old ladies, and every time I tell them that I'm part of a different religion and they nod along, they seem to believe it, then they just kind of move on, and I feel both bad about it, but at the same time, I just wish they would understand and take the hint that I'm not interested. But I also don't want to be like overtly rude to them because they're incredibly nice. And I'm not one to attack their faith just because they have a specific view of life that's different than I do, despite my disagreement with specifically their doctrine. I'm sure if I have any ex-JWs in my audience, they'll understand why. But basically, I've spent the past 4 years of my life screwing with and fucking with this same two group of missionaries, and they always fall for it. I kind of feel bad, but at the same time, they always show up, they sit at my door for like 2 minutes, and they wait for me to answer, and every time I feel guilty, and I don't know, alright? Does this make me a bad person that I lie to the missionaries? I have to genuine question here. Tony Tubular. Coworker tried to shame me for touching my shoe. This happened a few years ago in a large corporate office I worked in. I was conversing with my boss while sitting on this file cabinet drawer type of thing that had a cushion on top for people to sit on. Probably about 6 months into working there. Enter asshole coworker, or AC. AC worked on a team adjacent to ours, and was the type of woman who was generally disagreeable and would put people down, especially doing it in front of others to humiliate them. Probably to project some sort of insecurity or the need to be better than others, I don't know. Unfortunately, she had quickly worked her way into a mid-level position at a young age, which added to her arrogance. Well, she approached and pulled up a chair to chit-chat with my boss and I about something we were working through. As I was sitting on the drawer, I had one leg crossed over another and must have been playing with my shoe and shoelaces subconsciously with my hand. Out of nowhere, AC interrupts the conversation and exclaims, "Ew! You just touched the bottom of your shoe! That's like so gross! Do you know how disgusting the bottom of a shoe is?" My boss and I kind of just looked at each other. I think AC wanted me to act embarrassed and coalesce to her gripe or bow down to her or something, but I just responded, "Why would you call me out like that other than to be an asshole?" She was shocked and dumbfounded that someone actually retorted back to her snide comment. She tried backtracking, saying, "Well, I just don't want you to get sick because the bottom of your shoe has so many germs." To which I responded, "Okay, then send me a Slack message or tell me privately instead of trying to humiliate me in front of people. That's just completely rude and disrespectful." She quickly changed the subject back to what we were talking about and wrapped up her involvement before leaving back to her desk. My boss turned to me, trying to hold back her laugh, saying, "I've never seen someone put AC in her place before. You just absolutely roasted her." That was definitely one of my smoothest comebacks to date, and she never mocked me again. So, I only ever had one coworker who was like this, and it was my first boss when I was working at a fast food place. The guy was in his 30s and incredibly insecure, would oftentimes flirt with the female staff who had just turned 18. There's a lot of sketchy implications that I would love to divest further in another video, but anyways, any time that he had the opportunity to, he would always belittle me for no goddamn reason. I remember one time he got a haircut and like all the girls were like surrounding him like, "Oh, you look so cute with your hair," and he's just sitting there with his goofy fucking smile. And I walk out. I had been doing everyone's fucking job because they were all fraternizing with the boss, and I was left alone back there. And as I come out, he's like, "Yeah, at least my hair's better than Oz's." It's like, dude, what the fuck? Granted, I did have like, at this point, kind of like emo scene skater kid hair because I was 17 and my father was no longer giving me buzz cuts, so I grew my hair out and I've been growing it out. But still, like, who the fuck does that? And why were you surrounding yourself with 17-year-old girls, you fucking creep? But I remember all I said was, "Okay," and then just turned around and got back to work. It was just, why bother? What a goober. Anyways, have you had any experiences like this in your work? And if so, how close did it make you to ending up on the 6 o'clock news? Numerous Ambition 13. I told you to draw an autoportrait, not to try to be funny. To preface this incident, I have to admit I'm pretty specifically looking. I have a skin condition called vitiligo, which means I have depigmentation patches of skin around my body, face included thanks to my luck, as well as a visible facial scar. It's something I've learned to happily live with, and so it doesn't bother me anymore. During COVID-induced online classes, during kinda local equivalent of high school, we got a new arts and music teacher. As neither of those subjects had streamed classes, she did not know what I looked like. The first task from arts she gave us was to draw or paint an autoportrait as true to life as possible, probably to test our skill without risking us 18-year-olds being smartasses. So I painted an autoportrait, scar, vitiligo, and all, and submitted it. The next day I received a message saying that she does not find it funny and demanding me to explain myself. I figured it'd be a lot better to not argue, told her that I do indeed look like that, and just sent her a selfie. She did not take it too well, accused me of photoshopping the picture or applying makeup, and threatened to report me if I did not get on a video call that instant. So I got on the video call she had already set up, turned on my camera, greeted her, moved around a bit, and scrubbed my face with makeup remover. To both of our dismays, it did nothing. She kind of stuttered and mumbled a few words before apologizing, after which she promptly said I should have clarified how I looked while submitting the picture. But hey, a little trust, no? We both got off the call with no further incidents during online classes. It was fun seeing her stare at me in apologetic disbelief when we returned to school, though. Also, gotta love that you should have warned me what you looked like when submitting an auto-portrait. Like, I do wonder if maybe this teacher just dealt with a lot of students who just pulled bullshit like this all the time. It was just like, oh, come on, not again. Then to their dismay and abject horror, it turns out the person was telling the truth. Like, there has to be some kind of chain of events that caused the teacher to be dismissive of the possibility their student actually had this form of disfigurement, rather than, believing them on the merit of it. Because I'm not trying to defend their actions, by the way. I'm just genuinely curious what kind of steps led to this circumstance to happen, because I feel like teachers should at least be trained and have an understanding that this is a possibility that could be in their classroom. I mean, I would think that teachers would have that kind of training at least. I mean, it makes sense to me that they would. Like, they would, right? Teal Calla Lily. Yes, I went on a long solo trip without my family, because my mom died. I recently completed a mostly solo 100-day trip around Europe. I broke it up into 2 trips, and it was an amazing experience. I'm also a married mother of 3 kids. During my travels, I got a lot of judgment, especially from women, that I was a horrible parent for abandoning my family to take time for myself. Until I told them why. You see, this trip was my silver lining and goal that got me through the worst 4 years of my life, my healing journey. My mother had been diagnosed with early onset dementia February of 2020, and was already in the mid-stages when she finally got her diagnosis. She had a boyfriend but lived on her own and was a retired psychiatric nurse. I mention this because she knew what was happening, but was in denial and hid a lot of stuff from me until she couldn't anymore. I became her legal guardian and started staying at her house 1 night a week for a year before I finally got her onto a memory care unit May of 2021. That year she was home was hell on earth. She argued with a police officer for over an hour. I wasn't her daughter as just one example. Then it was 2.5 years of weekly visits to a memory care unit. As much as the staff really tried and cared, the memory care unit is not a fun place to go, and I will leave it at that. She died December 2023. I held her hand with one of my hands and held my grandmother's, her mother's hand, with the other when she took her last breath. I took a long break off work and went on an eat, pray, self-love tour that my wonderful husband supported me through. I was solo for 79 days of my 100-day trip. My husband and kids, 8, 11, and 14, joined me in France for 10 days, and my bestie joined me in Italy and Ireland for 11 days. Though it happened on many occasions, the best came at a wellness retreat and a British snob. She asked when I was going home, and I explained this was just one stop on my amazing trip. She went on and on about how she could never abandon her family and heavily implied I was a horrible, selfish person who loves myself more than my kids. Until I said, "Not that it's any of your business why I'm traveling, but I'm on this trip because my mom died from dementia, and I'm at this wellness retreat to take time for myself to process my grief and from the last 4 years I went through. Do you know how hard it is to heal from caregiver burnout when you have 3 kids to take care of?" Her jaw dropped to the floor and sputtered sorry for your loss before bolting from the table. The rest of the people at the table went silent. A smirk on my face watching her hightail it back to her room was priceless. All I can really do in this is offer my condolences to OP for what they went through, because honestly, that's one of my biggest fears, is watching someone that I love lose who they are. And I'm lucky enough to know that in my family, at least, memory loss and signs of this doesn't usually begin until you're far past 90 years old, on both sides, thankfully. But it still is something where I don't know how I would be able to handle seeing my mother or my father lose who they are as a person and forget me. That would absolutely crush me, so I can't even begin to blame OP for wanting to do a trip like this, and I can only hope that they're able to further heal and process the grief of what has happened to them over the past 4 years. This one's a bit different, as it's more in line with the videos that I post on the main channel compared to what's posted here, but I feel like it's a perfect example and perfectly in line with the content that is currently in this video. User EW73. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I require insulin to live, multiple times a day. When I was in middle school many years ago, we didn't have insulin pumps and had to use syringes and vials like everyone else. The school refused to let me carry it with me, meaning I had to go to the nurse's office several times a day to inject. It's not just before lunch, but could be any number of times depending on the current blood sugar levels. The district then cut nurse staff to just spending half a day at 2 schools, and the nurse left before I had lunch. I asked the office staff to unlock the office so I could take my insulin and eat lunch. They refused. By middle school, I'd been dealing with type 1 for about 5 years. and didn't take shit on the topic. I went to the school lobby, picked up the payphone, I just dated myself, and called 911, telling them, "Hi, I'm at school, and I'm a type 1 diabetic and the office won't unlock a door and let me take insulin." They sent a fire truck, and a bunch of firemen met me outside and walked me to the office and asked, while ignoring the staff, which room was the nurse's office. I pointed to the door and he was like, "All right, boys, chop it down. This kid needs his insulin." Suddenly, the office secretary could unlock the door, and I didn't need to put it in the nurse's office every day anymore. Traveling madness from Tumblr. Based fireman. The real Siebes. You sign up for the job because you want to save lives, and sometimes you get the chance to just be really clear about, yes, it is my job to save lives. There is an obstacle, and I am paid to use an axe to solve this problem. And Dark Directed responds, sometimes you're a hammer, well in this case an axe, and the problem really is a nail, or well in this case a door. First things first, I totally believe the firemen should have just ignored staff and cut the door down anyways. That would have really taught them a lesson to actually listen to students who need their insulin. Also, because how often does a fireman get to cut a door down when they're not dealing with an infernal blaze and just get to teach someone a lesson? I'm also very glad that in recent years, schools have come to understand the actual critical need of insulin among students and shouldn't just be blocking that shit off from them. Familiar Philosophy 95. Lunch supervisor tried to inject my sister with insulin she didn't need. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at a pretty young age, 8. I'm actually really lucky that I was able to have such a good support system during my primary school years. All my teachers knew that I had diabetes, as well as the lunch ladies, and the lunch supervisors, and they never really treated me differently apart from being concerned for me sometimes. This actually concerns a lunch supervisor who me and my sister, suspect to be kinda racist, and happened a few months, around 5, after I got diagnosed. For context, we're black, and when we were younger, me and my sister, who I'll call B for clarity, were pretty much identical, despite the fact that she was a year younger than me. It got to a point that relatives used to remark that people could almost mistake us for twins. At school, this wasn't really such a problem because we used to act very differently. I was more introverted and very much into books, whilst she was a quintessential extrovert and was always more fierce. And for people who have seen us day in and day out, it was clear that we were different. Despite the fact that this supervisor knew us by name, by face, and could differentiate us, she would always act snide to us in a way that was uncomfortable. Our school was incredibly diverse with a minority of white people, and mostly Asians and black people, so I honestly don't know where this came from. Anyway, this supervisor knows that I take insulin for lunch, and that I'm going straight to the nurse once it's lunchtime. I was even allowed to leave early sometimes to get my dose. One day, she sees my sister playing on the playground before they call us for lunch. We were allowed to play for around 15 minutes before lunch, eat lunch, and then get 30 minutes to play again before classes started back up again. And I'm paraphrasing from my sister here. Grabbed my sister and started dragging her to the nurse. The nurse's office, in which I and my fellow diabetics would take our insulin, was around a 10-minute walk from the playground and quite close to both the lunch hall and the pastoral team. And the separate nurse's office for normal scrapes and stuff was really around 2 minutes from the playground. Despite the fact that my sister was crying out saying, "I'm not OP, I'm B, her sister," she apparently didn't believe her and marched her straight there. She gets to the nurse and sees she's not there. Of course she's not. She's at the normal one, and we've already taken our doses, and tries to force my sister to take insulin. Guys, this is incredibly dangerous for non-diabetics, and despite the fact that my sister was crying at this point, the supervisor didn't care. One of the pastoral team members heard her crying, goes to investigate, and comes to the scene. One look at my sister, and she asks my sister, "B, are you okay? What's happened?" My sister tells me that the supervisor just went pale, like all the blood drained from her face. Then she goes red, and as my sister is explaining, tries to butt in and say, "Well, she didn't say she was B. How was I supposed to know? I thought she was OP." Yeah, that didn't really fly well. Edit, I'm sorry about the inconclusiveness of the story. I forgot to add it in, probably because she didn't get fired. I remember seeing her in year 6, so 3 years after I was diagnosed. I'm pretty sure she got suspended, not fired, and she had to go through rigorous first aid training, as well as being sent, I think that's the word, to the board of directors of which our head mistress was on. I absolutely agree that she should have gotten fired, but she was one of those who'd been there forever. Just because she was there for a long time and was friendly with people doesn't mean that she shouldn't have gotten fired. I remember an incident report was sent to our parents, and even with my sister telling them what happened, I wasn't there obviously, my parents tried to raise a huge stink. They're first-gen immigrants though, and I guess it wasn't taken as seriously because of that. So, I've been pretty much stun-locked trying to figure out how a circumstance like this can happen beyond just having zero faith in children and not believing them and thinking that she was simply lying and trying to get out of her diabetic shock in order to continue playing on the equipment. So, she thought that she would save the day by dragging her to the nurse's office despite her pleas that she's not OP, in fact is her sister. I can certainly connect the dots of how this could definitely have some racial motivation attached to it, but also, I'm so pale I get moonburns, so I don't think I can really actually relate to this, and for those of you who can relate to this, what do y'all think? Do you guys think there could be a racial aspect to this, or do you think that maybe she just doesn't believe children in general, or what's your general thought and consensus for those of you who have actually experienced this in your life and can give some proper input beyond a pale motherfucker who's pastier than a goddamn tube of toothpaste? Whole Kitchen, 3328. Roommate kept using my makeup without asking, so I made sure she'd never do it again. I shared an apartment with a girl who had no concept of boundaries. She constantly borrowed my stuff without asking. Clothes, shoes, and the worst of all, my makeup. I told her countless times to stop, but she always brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. Well, the last straw came when I found out that she had used my expensive foundation for a party and didn't even bother cleaning the bottle. That's when I decided it was time to teach her a lesson. I went out and bought a cheap, old foundation from the dollar store and swapped it with mine, adding a bit of self-tanner to the mix. I left it in plain sight on my vanity and waited. Sure enough, the next weekend, she waltzed out of the bathroom with an orange face. I didn't say a word as she headed off to her party. The next day, she came home furious, complaining that people had been laughing at her all night, and I just smiled and said, "Oh no, maybe it wasn't your shade." She didn't touch my stuff again after that. So what kind of shenanigans can actually happen if someone were to borrow your makeup and leave it open, or perhaps using it without properly cleaning makeup brushes? I feel like there could be a potential biological contamination or makeup being ruined by being left open and exposed to air for long periods of time. Like, I feel like it's already frustrating enough to find out that your roommate's using your makeup, and I know makeup isn't cheap in the slightest, especially if you have like a limited edition makeup palette or something like that. But then to find out they're not properly even taking care of it on top of that, that feels like that'd be incredibly fucking frustrating. Also, is it common sense to not touch someone else's makeup, or is it common practice to share makeup? That is a genuine question on my end, because I know that my stepmother used to be a big user of the website Makeup Alley, where she would exchange makeup products with other people and that kind of stuff. So I know that kind of practice exists, but that was also a consensual practice where they actively chose to do that and sought people out who were willing to do that, compared to this, where this is just a roommate bumming their other roommate's makeup off and using it without express permission. Smith Angel 0, micromanaging me. A few years ago, I worked at an office where my manager was the king of micromanagement. Steve would hover over everyone's shoulders, recheck every email we sent, and send follow-ups with friendly reminders for tasks that weren't even due yet. One day, I'm working on a project we were all assigned, a detailed report for a quarterly review. I'm making steady progress, but Steve decides to help. And by help, I mean he sits next to me and dictates every little thing. From font choice to phrasing, he even made me reread a paragraph 5 times because he didn't like how it felt. I finally finished the report, but before I can even save it, Steve takes the file and sends it directly to the higher-ups. Doesn't review it, doesn't double-check, just sends it off with his name in the subject line. Fast forward to the meeting later that week. The head of our department starts going over the report and points out an embarrassing mistake. Steve had somehow changed the revenue numbers while hovering over me. The mistake made it look like we lost a lot of money. The room goes dead silent. Steve's face turns beet red as the boss asks, "Who submitted this?" Steve tries to deflect, but I casually raise my hand and say, "Steve submitted it. But he insisted on reviewing every detail himself. I was just following his directions. The boss doesn't say anything, but looks directly at Steve for a long moment before moving on. After that, Steve stopped micromanaging me entirely. In fact, he avoided assigning me anything directly for weeks. Best day of my career so far. So when I was younger and first put into a position of management, I did fall into the micromanagement trap, and I felt like I had a new responsibility, and because my old responsibilities were suddenly gone, I needed to be very micromanagey on every detail because I was trying to fill a new void that was in my work, and honestly, looking back on it, I was probably pretty fucking annoying and got in the way of things a lot. And my guess would be is a lot of people who probably enter management roles probably feel the same kind of pressure where they suddenly feel like they need to earn that management position and begin to overmanage and micromanage the people below them. And because I never really found a direct solution for it, for those of you who are in managing positions, what kind of solutions did you find to avoid yourself from micromanaging? And did you ever have a problem like that, where when you were thrust into the responsibilities of it, you kind of felt this sudden urge to be very involved with every little detail to justify your position? Or did you just never have that problem and were simply built different? Because who knows, there might be someone in my audience who could really use that kind of advice, and I think honestly that could help lead a very constructive conversation to help prevent Steves in the future. Because most people don't mean to be like Steve. Steve is probably a very special case. So, for any industry vets who are willing to give any kind of advice, that would be greatly appreciated. Dear Johnny HD, my father accused me of not being sick while I had a heart attack. Back in 2017, when I was just 17, I had a heart attack. It happened on Christmas Eve of all days. Instead of getting support from my family, my father accused me of making this whole thing up for attention, despite the fact that I hate attention at family gatherings. I was rushed to our local hospital, and things were so serious that they had to transfer me by ambulance to a larger hospital in the city because they couldn't treat me locally. You'd think that would have been proof enough that this wasn't some ploy for attention, but no. I ended up needing surgery and went through a tough 2-month recovery period. It was one of the most physically and emotionally challenging times of my life. Through all of that, my father never once visited me in the hospital. He was too scared and ashamed to show up, and he's never apologized for how he treated me during one of the worst moments of my life. To this day, we don't speak. I've cut him out of my life because I realized I deserve better than a parent who accused me of faking a life-threatening medical emergency. So I can somewhat understand a parent's hesitation to not initially believe a child, because they could be faking an illness for attention or to get out of school. I mean, hell, I know I did it a lot when I was younger. I used to crumple up granola bars and put them in the toilet and be like, oh look, I threw up, can I stay home from school today? But then eventually this backfired on me and I started actually throwing up in the toilet, and it turns out I had severe stomach ulcers. But that's a totally different story for another time when I was 9. But still, kids will do things to get out of school and to fake illnesses. Let's not pretend like this doesn't happen. Even if you never did as a child, there's still going to be one who does. But it's one thing to be skeptical of a child who's trying to get out of school versus a 17-year-old who's having heart complications at a family gathering. Those are two drastically different situations and scenarios. And, I mean, hell, one doesn't even have their brain fully developed. I mean, yes, the 17-year-old doesn't have their frontal lobe fully developed or connected yet, but it is far more developed than your average 7-year-old. So for the father to be this dismissive, and then when he finds out that it actually was something serious, and to never once even try to apologize or make amends or even visit during the complications in the months of hell that OP went through, that's fucked up. And this is a circumstance where going no contact is entirely understandable. I would still say leave lines open in case your father ever does want to actually apologize. Actually, wait. OP is my age. Father hasn't apologized in 8 years. I don't think he ever will. So perhaps in this situation, just simply never accepting an apology is actually justified. I mean, he had his window to apologize. And if his pride means more than the relationship with their child, that's just sad. So let this be a soft lesson to everyone listening. If you were wrong about something and it was something serious and your pride is getting in the way of you apologizing for admitting that mistake, don't let a relationship rot just because you're afraid to admit you were wrong. Osaka motherfucker. I got an obnoxious passenger fired. This is a long one, but it was the best revenge story of my life so far. I'm a South African living in Japan, so I took my Japanese wife to meet my parents and have a honeymoon in South Africa. On the first of 3 flights back to Japan was from Johannesburg to Qatar. We take our seats and get settled in. I noticed that a lot of passengers around us are wearing the same t-shirts, some kind of pharmaceutical company. As soon as we got settled in, I noticed that the women and 2 men sat behind us were also employees of this company. As soon as they got settled in, I noticed she, let's call her Brandy, was quite chatty, loud, and a bit obnoxious. But I'm a nervous flyer, so at the same time, I was more worried about the takeoff than her. So I put my earpods in and whoosh! We take off for our 8-hour flight to Qatar. As soon as the seatbelt sign switched off, Brandy started ordering brandy and cokes for herself and her 2 coworkers. As each drink came, Brandy's voice got louder and more obnoxious. After drink number 6, the topic of her conversation turns to relationships. By this time, half the cabin could hear their conversation about how she disapproves of interracial relationships. Even I could hear her through the guttural screams and face-melting guitar riffs of Meshuggah blasting through my earpods. Then it happened. A nice woman on 4 seats to her left quite loudly says, "Ma'am, could you please quiet down? You're a bit loud and I'm trying to get some sleep." I heard it too, so paused the song and took out my left earpod to excitedly eavesdrop. Brandy was not happy. She says, "Excuse me, this isn't a nighttime flight. Haven't you heard of earplugs?" And then just jumped straight back into her conversation. The tension in the air immediately changed. In that moment, all the people who heard the interaction caught eyes with each other, and we all knew this flight was about to get interesting. About 20 minutes later, a flight attendant comes and politely asks Brandy to quiet down a bit. She begrudgingly agrees, orders another round, and quiets down. But it only takes Brandy about 30 minutes to get all the way back up to a volume louder than the jet engines roaring outside the windows. Then, another Chinese woman from the other side of the cabin gets up and walks to where Brandy is sitting, and in her best attempt at English says, "Please be quiet. My child keeps waking up because of you." Brandy looks up and, I shit you not, asks this Chinese woman in a very mispronounced Chinese, "Can you speak Chinese?" I'm fluent in Chinese, so I could understand what she was trying to say, and just kept repeating it until the frustrated Chinese woman went back to her seat. By this time, both flight attendants for our cabin were very much aware of Brandy's sassy nature and decided to close the bar off for the whole cabin, which pissed me off because I was hoping to enjoy a few more whiskeys before we landed. A few minutes later, I hear the sound of shuffling, then plastic, and then the faint sound of what sounds like the cap of a glass bottle being cracked open. Then the sound of liquor being poured into cups. Yep! Brandy had opened her bottle of duty-free brandy she bought at the airport. And, once again, their conversation began to crescendo. Now, the whole time I had been spectating the Brandy situation, I wasn't really paying attention to my wife, who I assumed was sleeping next to me. I then saw my wife pull one of her earpods out, turn to try and get a look at Brandy through the crack in the seat, and then turn to look at me with a face I rarely see my wife make. It was a face of pure rage and frustration. I snapped. Now, usually, I'm not the kind of person who likes to cause a scene, but I decided that I'm not going to let this asshole of a woman ruin my wife's flight. So, like a crazy person, I stood up and announced loud enough that the entire cabin turned to hear me, "Excuse me, everybody, can I please have all your attention? By the show of hands, who of you would like these people to shut the fuck up?" About 30 passengers all around us raised their hands. I then turned to Brandy and just point and say, "Look, understand? Shut up." I sat back down to the sound of applause from all the passengers that were raising their hands. My wife was shocked that I did that, but I told her that I did it because I could see that Brandy was beginning to bother you too. She gave me a hug and the flight attendant saw what I did and brought me a cup of Coke, but slipped me 2 of those little bottles of whiskey. Thankfully, Brandy and the gang then passed out and were quiet for the rest of the flight. So my wife and I could relax. But Brandy wasn't finished. And now she had a new target. Me. On our descent, Brandy awakes and decides that she wants to place some cards on the entertainment screen attached to the back of my seat, trying her best to hit the buttons hard enough to make my seat move. I teach kids for a living, so I know that she is behaving like an angry toddler trying to get a rise out of me. So I ignore her. We land, the plane taxis off the runway, and everyone starts getting up to get off the plane. As soon as I get up and she sees my wife and I, she starts repeatedly insulting me about my weight and how I married an Asian woman because I can't get with a real South African woman and blah blah blah. High school bully level bullshit. I just smile and nod my head at everything she was saying and exit the plane. Finally, Brandy and her coworkers walk off and my wife and I find a nice cafe to have a coffee and chill my stretch for a bit before we make our way to the next boarding gate for our second flight to Malaysia. We eventually get to the gate and, lo and behold, guess who's also flying to Malaysia? That's right, it's Brandy. She's standing by the gate window taking selfies and doesn't notice me. I find an empty seat next to a guy wearing the same pharmaceutical company t-shirt and say, "Excuse me, sir, that woman over there with blonde hair taking a selfie, what's her name?" He asks me why, and I say that she looks like someone I used to go to high school with, but I wasn't sure and didn't want to make an ass of myself by asking her directly. He tells me, and I say, "Oh, then that's not her, sorry." I thank him, and for the remainder of the way to the gate, logged onto the airport Wi-Fi, found their company's Facebook page and website, and sent a detailed recount of Brandy's behavior, being sure to include all the colorful things she was talking about with her coworkers. The next 2 flights back to Japan were uneventful and got home safe and sound. 2 weeks later, I get a reply from the CEO asking me for my number as he would like to talk to me about what happened. He calls me and profusely apologizes for what Brandy put us through. Turns out that by the time that Brandy had landed in Malaysia, the CEO had seen my message, changed her return flight back to South Africa the very next day, and fired her at arrivals in the Johannesburg airport when she got back. I bought a bottle of brandy and coke on my way home from work that day to celebrate with my lovely wife. Now, there certainly might be a little bit of embellishment in this story, but honestly, that's pretty common with these. Honestly, let this be a reminder to anyone who's wearing a company t-shirt to remember that all of your actions are a direct representation of your company, and everything you do or say is a direct reflection. So it's always best when you're wearing your company's merch to be on your best behavior. This is also the same reason why I can't be toxic in Marvel Rivals, because my name is Oz Media. So if I'm yelling at people, then suddenly everyone's going, "Oh damn, Oz is a fucking asshole in Marvel Rivals." So I'm always on my best behavior, and in fact being positive to the point of being toxic. Oh, but sometimes someone's toxic first and I get to swing back, and God, I live for those moments. For those of you wondering, Marvel Rivals is a competitive shooter that's online where you play against other players and you play as Marvel heroes, and it's actually pretty good for being a Marvel tie-in game. Shockingly so, actually. And because I know a lot of you are probably gonna ask, I'm a filthy Penny Parker main. I'm rank lord with her. I don't want to talk too much about that because it's actually kind of embarrassing. Downtown Bag 8008. Mobile phone company won't stop pushing a plan, so I decided to traumatize him. I actually had my first ever traumatize them back situation the other day. Never expected it, and I'm very excited to share. For context, I was recently diagnosed with a terminal brain disease with an average 4 to 5 year life expectancy, with a small percent in the 10 to 20 year. I have only known for a few months. I'm still very ignorant about it, and I'm still raw and probably quite unstable. I intend to be in the 30 to 40 year category. I don't often bring it up or reference it unless relevant to the situation. All of that is to say, this is not typical behavior for me. But it was too irresistible. I have a new mobile carrier, and when the first full bill showed up, it was almost $40 more per month than what was promised by the agent who sold me the plan set. So I'm on the phone with a rep to help me fix the issue. He reviews my account and sees several things increasing my bill, one of which is a monthly $10 fee allowing me to upgrade to the newest phone every 2 years. I have no desire to be a part of this program, so I told him to remove it. I'm thinking, there's 25% of the problem gone. However, the customer service rep thinks it's a bad move for me to drop that perk. He tells me that if I drop the option, I cannot get back on the program. That's fine. I don't want to be on the program. Please remove me. But you really want to keep it because 2 years of $10 a month is only $240. The latest phone is always more expensive than that. That's okay. I'm not concerned about having the latest phone. Please remove me. 2 more times he tried to push me into keeping the plan. I finally got fed up and decided to traumatize him. Since you don't seem to be hearing me, I'm going to be extremely blunt with you. I was recently diagnosed with a terminal brain disease, and I have 4 years to live. I don't give a shit about upgrading to the latest and greatest phone. I'd only be able to do it once anyway. And he dropped me from the plan. I know that some customer service reps are almost like contractually required to try to prevent people from leaving plans, and they also may or may not have commission sales tied to it. So there are times where I can understand why they might be so pushy, but fuck, it is annoying. No one likes being pushed into something and feeling like they have to essentially bend over and curtail to what the salesperson is selling so they can just get off the phone. And like, there are times where I feel bad because you're just trying to make ends meet, and your contract probably says you have to do this. And I feel like that a lot of people probably don't like actually being in this position as a customer service rep. But who knows, maybe some of them actually revel and enjoy doing this. For those who have previously been customer service reps, what's the 411 on this? I'd actually be really curious to read some comments and get an insight on this. Like, is haggling with customers like this part of your job, or is it like a specific kind of customer service rep who's an asshole that fits this kind of bill here? Because I also know that not all customer service reps are bad people. I mean, yeah, it can be annoying, but you have a job you're trying to do, and I get and understand that. Probably just bitchin'. The time I vomited blood during a work meeting. So this happened over 5 years ago, but I was thinking about it today. My pregnancy with my daughter was incredibly unexpected. My husband and I, 25 at the time, had been told by our doctor that we were both medically infertile, low sperm count and PCOS respectively. We were given fertility medication to start with, as further procedures would not be given the green light until the initial options had been exhausted, and we were told that we were looking at about 5 years until the ball was really rolling. Well, we got pregnant with our daughter, the first month on the medication. Surprise! While unexpected, she was very wanted, and we were over the moon. Except my husband was unemployed at the time, and I was working as a high school teacher with pretty rough kids. My pregnancy was also awful. I spotted constantly, had dizzy spells, and had hyperemesis gravidarum from 8 weeks until my daughter was born. I was throwing up about 10 times a day, was hospitalized for dehydration 5 times, and lost 18 kilograms, 40 pounds for my American audience, over the course of my pregnancy. Fun times. In my department were 4 other teachers, Karens 1 through 3, and Pete, the sweetest boomer you ever met. The Karens were by the books what you would find in Australian public education. Catty, calcified, and bigoted. I called in sick at least once a week because of my rough pregnancy, and they were constantly making nasty comments about it, both to my face and other departments, despite the fact that none of my work was ever left for them to do. It affected my professional life quite badly, and I often thought of quitting, despite having no real option to do so. Cue the trauma. The Karens insisted on weekly after-school departmental meetings that lasted several hours, despite never covering more than a post-it note worth of info. I had missed several, and the Alpha Karen demanded I come to the next one, sitting in a stuffy room where the Karens went over the latest Home and Away episode. I felt a wave of nausea. I stood and excused myself, but Alpha moved to block the door, saying that I could hold whatever it was for a minute while we sorted out a detail in a planning document. I asked Pete to pass me the bin at his feet, which he did, eagerly, and I projectile vomited. Blood. See, the constant spewing had irritated my throat enough that it bled every time I was sick. My doctor knew about it, and honestly, it looked a lot worse than it was. The Karens stood in silent horror as the pale, gone-pregnant woman threw up blood in a bin, and Pete let out a piercing scream. He shouted at them to call an ambulance, but I waved them off, saying that this happens to me all the time. After the dry retching stopped, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, smearing blood everywhere, and asked if they still needed help with a document. They demurred, and I grabbed my things and left. The Karens never bullied me again, and instead only spoke to me in the softest of voices for the rest of the year, as if I were dying. Glorious. So, my understanding, and please for the love of God correct me if I'm wrong, a pregnancy can go just a multitude of different directions. You can either have the easiest possible pregnancy where honestly it really doesn't affect your day-to-day life, or you could have one that pretty much makes your day-to-day life hell, and everyone's personal experiences can vary so goddamn wildly, it's honestly, at least in my opinion, not fair to compare two women's pregnancies to one another. And the reason why I say this, despite the fact that I'm probably one of the least qualified people to talk about this, is that I do wonder if the Karens in this story, if one of them had their own child and they got lucky and had a fairly quote-unquote easy pregnancy, and when I say easy, I mean easy by comparison, but they thought that she was either overreacting or causing a scene or using it to get her to work and may have been annoyed with that, using their own experiences as a candidate for comparison when, honestly, I don't think that's quite fair in a situation like this because it can be so wildly different, as I was saying. And yeah, she got put in her place. Honestly, it'd be pretty horrific to see a pregnant woman throw up blood because honestly, as probably poor Pete did, probably assumed the absolute worst. But thankfully, by the sounds of it, it sounds that OP did actually end up having her daughter, and hopefully things have been smooth since what sounds to be a pretty god-awful pregnancy. Part of me wants to ask what kind of experiences people have had with others when it comes to them being pregnant and what kind of discrimination or treatment they have gotten, but the other half of me doesn't want to know because it would break my heart and I feel like I'd probably really just hate it and feel horrible. So, yeah. Jabulia. Woman won't stop fishing for information at a traffic collision and is then traumatized by the information she was fishing for. Content warning for death. I'm a police officer. A few years ago, I was stationed on the perimeter of a fatal traffic collision. Essentially, what happened was a dude was driving recklessly in a stolen vehicle, ended up going off-road, unintentionally, and rolled several times, was ejected, no seatbelt, and died. Car was upside down in a field adjacent to the road and body was lying in the field about 200 feet away, covered up by a yellow tarp while we waited for the medical examiner to arrive. We closed the roadway near the field and had it blocked for traffic in both directions. Naturally, people had to be turned around and rerouted/detoured. Many were annoyed, but most people saw the condition of the vehicle and the number of police cars and went on with their day. One woman in particular just would not move along. Rubberneckers are common, and it's normal for people to try and fish for information, but this woman was relentless, and after several minutes of us politely deflecting her questions, she said, "Well, thank God everyone was okay." I just stared at her for a second and replied, "They weren't okay." She looked at me and was like, "What? They weren't?" While once again looking around me, trying to see into the field. I said, "No, actually, they died." Right about then, she noticed the yellow tarp and put two and two together. She gasped, covered her mouth in shock, began tearing up and breathing quickly, before finally going back to her vehicle where she had a mini meltdown and then left after taking like 15 minutes to calm down. If she had just turned around and went on her way, she never would have known the difference. But she just had to know. Massive, massive content warning for what I'm about to say here, because it does involve a very tragic death. The worst accident that I have ever bore witness to happened while I was driving with my mother to the airport while I was visiting home for Christmas in Idaho. The roads were slick, it was foggy, and things were definitely not safe. And on the way there, passing by the freeway, one side was entirely closed off, and as we passed by, we found out why. There were the charred remains of a car parked underneath a semi. We later came to learn that someone was driving the wrong way on the freeway, having taken an exit ramp as an on-ramp, not realizing they were getting onto the wrong side of the freeway due to the fog. Because of this, they hit a semi front-on and could not get out of the car. And unfortunately, I'm also very aware that what I saw in the car was in fact someone's remains, and they hadn't quite gotten to the point where they were able to pull the remains out after putting the fire out. And I know that's an incredibly grim story to tell, but while you're driving to the airport and if the road conditions aren't good, please take the extra 5 minutes to make sure you get there safely. That's all I can really ask. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code OZ at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.